I moved to San Diego. I'm not getting enough revenue to support myself, racking up credit card debt. There was this very moment, like I went to Indeed with less than 5 minutes. Basically, I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm not getting a job. Plan B is not an option anymore. One of the biggest elements for me was that it wasn't in the niche when I started. I'm going to help all small business with video marketing. Classic mistake. Don't be me. People want to work with people who are in the niche. They want to know that you understand their problems.
Imagine leading a business that delivers incredible value and care, but you're finding it harder and harder to truly show that quality to your prospects. You know your services are top tier, yet earning trust, attracting the best talent, and getting those vital referrals feels like an uphill battle. Debt is piling up, business is stagnating, and nothing seems to be helping. What if you could simplify that complexity, attract more clients, charge more, build a brand that truly stands out, and transform your entire business? Welcome to today's episode of Your Business Growth Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Shapiro, and my guest today is Nick Bonitatibus. Today, I'm going to be asking Nick about his journey to standing out, breaking through, and getting back to growth. Nick, welcome to the show.
Jeremy, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to dive in. Here we go.
So you've been deeply involved in the senior care space since 2014. What drew you into that industry, and what was the early experience like being in that space?
Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, when I was in college, I was really looking for an opportunity that I could be creative, something that would, I loved marketing. I even minored in marketing. It was just something that was kind of my passion. I was even doing catering, during college when I was considering that line of work. And so an opportunity came up through a mutual friend, one of those things, kind of the stars aligning. Mutual friend introduced me. Next thing you know, I get this job at this company that's, it's called Hurricane Marketing Enterprise. I'm like, great, it's got marketing in the name. This is great. Only to find out later that it was a specific company that was designed in helping senior care businesses, home care specific, to helping them grow and scale through sales and marketing, really just teaching and coaching. And so it was not something that I necessarily chose. It was something that, chose me, I guess, in this case. And so I was thrown in to this whole industry that I knew absolutely nothing about, basically as my, first career. But you learn pretty quickly as I started going to events, how incredible this industry is. People that are dedicated to helping seniors get the care that they need, and these, seniors that are struggling and having a hard time, right? Just being able to live their activities of daily living. And so, I feel very grateful to be able to serve this niche and kind of it finding me, because it's been so rewarding. As well, it's been very beneficial from a business standpoint, because right now I don't have any competitors in what I do. So that's another element we could potentially dive into in regards to understanding your niche.
Okay, so there may not be competitors now, but rewinding to 2014, it's a crowded industry broadly, right? So what was the gap you saw where you realized you wanted to compete or be different than a lot of the companies in the space?
So to be direct, right? So my first job out of college was in 2014 working for this organization. Then when I was working for this company, I started to see a need for the things that I was doing for this company, right? I was doing their video marketing. I was doing their social media marketing. I was basically running their entire marketing department. And an opportunity came for me to actually speak at one of their events in 2016. So I went on stage. I'm super nervous, pretty young. Most of the crowd is twice as old as I am, as I'm, jumping into this, right? I was 24 at the time, and one of the things that I found pretty quickly was, one, that people really loved what I was sharing. And that there was a huge need for the content that I was talking about, right? Leveraging and utilizing social media, creating video. But the issue that ended up arising was that I was only speaking at these events 3 times a year, 2 to 3 times a year. And if somebody wanted to do something, they had to just take what I was teaching and do it. I wasn't able to facilitate and help them to actually execute on the things that I was learning. And so then I started going down my own kind of personal development rabbit hole, Tony Robbins and, Think and Grow Rich, just all these things. And if you do enough of personal development, it starts to groom you for starting your own business. And so in 2019, I decided to go out on my own and really giving people support to be able to deliver, a strong social media presence, creating video that can make a difference. Because again, I saw this need that they just weren't doing it from me giving a keynote. That wasn't enough. And I just felt like, hey, not only can I build the business that I want, but also be able to really support this niche, this industry that's not being served, that other people aren't really talking about, these specific things in this specific industry.
So for our listeners, what I'm hearing is you were offering initially the DIY option. You were teaching people how to do it, and then they go supposedly do it themselves. You then moved to the done with you and eventually to the done for you. And this is like a common arc we see in services-based businesses, that you offer the do it yourself, done with you, or done for you. And that's really neat that you're able to expand the offerings along that path. So that's an exciting feeling when you're speaking in front of an audience and giving them the information. It's wonderful if they then go and do something with it, but it's not often you get to see that through. As you were growing with the done with you and done for you services, like what did that feel like as you got to see firsthand the needle move in these businesses and got to see that growth with those business owners?
Yeah, and I wish I could say that this happened quickly, but it definitely took some time. So my first actual offer launch was a course, right? I was so excited. I'm going to get money in my sleep. That was the thought process. I'm going to get money in my sleep. I'm going to get this course. People are just going to buy this course. It's going to be amazing. And so I launched. I got some sales. I was super excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is possible. I'm making money for myself. This is amazing, right? And what ended up happening, I had continued people buying this course. And then they're like, Nick, this course is great. I'm like, awesome. Where are the videos? I'm like, well, and so that became this theme where I was trying to push this course and just continuing to try and get course sales, which also is a lot harder to sustain, right? You get a sale and then you're like, all right, well, this isn't consistent revenue coming in on a monthly basis. So from a business side, it was a struggle. Then COVID happened. That's a whole nother thing. We won't go down that rabbit hole. But basically, so I started with the course model, and then I thought, all right, maybe if I give them some additional coaching and support, that will help. That will help push them, give them that extra tool, really try and handhold them into this element. So then I started doing some one-on-one coaching, even eventually had a group coaching model, which I loved. It was so cool. I'm like working with multiple owners at the same time. They're collaborating. Things are happening. I'm like, all right, what video are you going to make? All right, they're going to go do this. And then they go, and then they don't show up for the next call because they didn't do the homework, because they didn't make the video. And so I kept thinking there has to be a better way. Like, what can I do? I can't sell no results, and the results only come if they make the videos. And so then I offered video editing services. I thought, all right, well, this is going to make it a little easier for them, just giving them these tools to make it simple. They just got to send me the video, make it happen. I had 2 people buy video editing services. You can guess where this is going. They didn't make any videos. And so it was through this, there was this kind of like the final straw that I had where I knew there had to be something that I could do. And so I had this kind of idea that I called digital directing. And this has really been such a pivotal, action item, because again, the mindset was, how can I get my clients the results as easy as possible for them? And so I'm like, if they just jump on a call with me, I can record with them, and then I'll edit the videos and it'll make it, that much easier for them. As soon as I started doing that, my entire business changed, because it made it that much easier for them to go from having, I have no idea what I'm doing, I don't know what I'm doing, to, all right, all you got to do is show up on a call with me and we will get it done. And that's the epitome of just like really seeing these problems of, not what's my problem on my business is that they're not getting the results. And so to me, that's been such a huge aspect. And I love that in your book too, and just talking about how action and results is such an important element. And so for me, it was just continuing to take these actions that were going to help my clients to get the quickest results and make it as easy as possible.
Are you enjoying this episode? Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. That'll help you get more episodes automatically as soon as they come out. So hit that subscribe button right now. And if you have a minute, leave a quick rating and review. That helps support the show. I think to a company we were working with years ago who's going to be adding a coaching program. And there was the idea of a guarantee of guaranteeing results from the coaching program. And thankfully, that did not come to fruition because I was biased as a coaching student, right? I was the one who would always get done what we said we do between sessions and show up with the homework done, the action items taken care of, and ready for, what's next, coach, right? I'm that rare outlier. What we learned is that most coaching students don't actually get things done. And if you try and guarantee a result that's dependent upon something you can't control, that's a really dangerous place to be, right? So, you saw this firsthand as well when offering all the support in the world for someone to get it done. They still have to take that action and get it done. You can only start to guarantee a result when you're the one responsible for producing that result. So it's interesting to see that. All right. So Nick, walk us through, where things went from growth mode to plateau and you started to feel stuck and you were suddenly like looking at jobs, like, do I stop this whole entrepreneurship thing? Do I look for jobs? Like, what was that moment like for you?
Yeah. So this happened when I was still in this kind of phase of trying to grow the course, get it going. I was in the process of moving because I had this goal and this dream to move to San Diego, and I didn't really care about how it may affect the business, moving to one of the most expensive cities in the country. But for me, I just felt like being here would be something that would facilitate, the growth. And this was also somewhat around the timing of COVID too. And so during this time, I moved to San Diego. I'm just not, I'm not getting enough revenue to support myself. I think I had like one coaching client that was paying me $500 a month. And then everything else, I'm just trying to do like odd end consulting work that's just, random things of trying to utilize my skill sets to get sales in here to just, struggle and get by, even like, racking up credit card debt, everything that was coming with this. And so there was this very moment, like key moment where I remembered it was very early on. It was probably one of the first month that I had moved to San Diego. And I went to Indeed and I specifically looked up a job, and with less than 5 minutes, I don't know, am I allowed to curse on this show? I don't know. I won't. It's okay. I won't. But basically I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm out. I'm done. I used more profanity, but basically I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not getting a job. And so it was one of those moments where it's kind of like plan B, and, nope, plan B is not an option anymore. And so when I really made this decision that the only option was my success, that was a really pivotal moment for me. And I always love that story of just choosing me and being like, no, entrepreneurship is for me. I'm going to figure out a way to make this work, and just being willing to try new things. And, one of the biggest things for me, which I didn't say this yet, but one of the biggest elements for me when I first launched the business was that it wasn't in the niche when I started. I was like, I'm going to help all small business with video marketing. Classic mistake, don't be me, right? Find your niche. And the worst part was I had this niche. I even had a friend specifically say, you should probably, do the senior care niche. And I was like, I don't want to get stuck in this, blah, 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 right? All these things that you say. But when I finally did decide to niche down and focus, things that was like one of the pivotal moments of my success was, okay, this is my core audience. Because what ends up happening is there was people that I knew that started referring me that weren't referring me because I wasn't in the niche. People want to work with people who are in the niche. And I remember I had one specific customer, they had signed up for my group coaching. I'm like, so why'd you decide to move forward with me? She's like, oh, well, you know the industry. I was like, that's what every person wants to hear. They want to know that you understand their problems. And if you're not in a specific niche, then you don't understand the key problems that your customers are having. And so that was kind of the first step in really things starting to move along, where I was able to build relationships and new opportunities kind of started to come from that point.
So a lot of business owners are actually afraid of this idea of niching down, especially early on when they are going wide. And they feel like if they choose a niche, they're saying no to all these potential prospects. Talk to us about that, thought process for you and how you had to learn that the hard way, like you're just talking about now. Like, how did you choose the niche and find comfort in knowing that not everyone would be attracted to the specificity you chose?
Yeah, it's one of those things where when we start our business, we feel that the wide net will make our life easier and better in acquiring customers. Like, oh, well, if I have a bigger niche, it'll be a bigger pool and it'll make it easier for me to get sales. But what ends up happening is, again, you're not able to get people to get on board with you because you're not specific to what their issues were. And what was funny for me was this moment happened where I had two niches that I wanted to choose from that I couldn't choose from. And this is one of those elements where you really have to pay attention to your intuition. And I can't even think of another time that this ever happened in my life, aside from this one moment where my intuition was screaming at me in the face. And this was, I had this kind of idea of either working with coaches and course creators to do video marketing or do video marketing in the senior care space. And I would go back and forth, and I'm like, I'm going to do for coaches and course creators. And then I go back and forth. And I'm like, I'm going to do it for coaches and course creators. And then I went back and forth. And then finally, I'm like, I'm going to do it for home care. And then the actions that I took when I made that decision for home care that I wasn't making when I was kind of deciding to do it for coaches and course creators, I was just boom, full speed ahead. I changed my website. I changed my social media. My brain started just going crazy off of like content ideas, resources that I could create. And so this is why niching down is so important, because it expands the support that you're able to create, because you're able to develop additional resources. You're able to develop different tools. You're able to speak to them differently than how this broad market. And like sales comes down to understanding people's problems. And if you're just, a one size fits all, then you just basically, you can't help anyone. And that's kind of been, my experience. Don't fear the niche. You can't get more niche than me right now. And my business continues to grow and expand in ways that I couldn't have dreamt of.
For our listeners who remember earlier in the season, we had an episode with Ryan Crownholm, and he was talking about this moment of trying to figure out the niches. And he sat down with his SEO guy, and they looked at like, what are the top 20 niches that are finding us? Like, what are people looking for when they end up on his website? And of those 20 things, like, well, what drives the most traffic? And they chose the highest volume niche that was coming to the site, and they just went all in on that. And that became this tremendous business. But just like you're saying, that only comes from dialing in and choosing a niche, because then all the rest of those pieces line up behind that decision. But while you're still in that indecision space, you are a generalist and you can't really speak to a prospect in a way that, resonates with them, that uses their language, that solves the problems they have. So kudos on figuring that out.
Yeah. And indecision is a decision. So like, I just wanted to add that last part there. It's like, you not deciding is a decision. So you got to make moves.
Linguistically, the word decide comes from this French word désir, of Latin roots and all, that is not about a choice of what you're going to do. The root actually is to cut off, right? So when we make a decision, it's really about everything else we're saying no to. so that we can say yes to the one thing. So you found the niche, but that only happened by saying no to the other options that you had in front of you. But your growth is from that. So kudos.
Thank you.
All right. So you touched on this earlier. You move across country, move to one of the most expensive places in the country, and are racking up credit card debt while at the same time trying to help companies to grow themselves. Was there any imposter syndrome going on, which is so common for entrepreneurs? Like, where were you emotionally balancing those two sides of things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, there's this element of when I got that first course sale that I mentioned, it's like, I can do this, right? But then when all of a sudden I was in this moment of like credit card debt and you're questioning, can I do this? Do I need to start driving Uber? Like those were things that I, thought about and contemplated and as this debt. But what it came down to is that we have to be willing to take action in figuring out what's going to work. And I think so often we get so caught up into making a decision that we end up, and again, this piggybacks on what we were just talking about, in not making a decision, which doesn't get you anywhere. And so, from the niche example, you have a better chance of success if you try one niche for 3 months and then see how it goes and then try another niche. And I think when it's our business, we feel like these decisions are so concrete, but when you think about anything in business, nothing is concrete in your business. It's by design. You can create your business however you want, and you can tweak it, you can change it, you can pivot, you can adjust. And so the quicker that you take action into, all right, I'm going to try this and see how it goes, instead of saying, I don't want to make a decision because I'm worried about getting stuck in this. You can make the decision, have success, and then be like, I don't want to do this anymore, and then still make another change. Even if you had success, like, it doesn't matter. It's your business. And if you've pivot once, you can pivot again. And there's tons of stories of entrepreneurs that I've heard of, right, that made these huge pivots in their life, thinking people are like, you're crazy. Why would you make this change? You're already successful. But you can make these changes and tweaks. And so being willing to try different things, right? Like, I was doing webinars, I was going live, I was email marketing. I'm just trying all of these different things to see what's going to, create the greatest results. And that's how we succeed, is basically how quickly can you fail?
Yeah, what you're touching on there that is so powerful for our listeners is this idea of testing. And so many business owners I know, myself included, the pivots often end up launching the next phase of business that totally eclipses the thing you were doing before. The little side idea, the little, new product launch thing becomes the bigger thing. And we only figure that out by trying. And so the more we can test a product idea, test out pricing, test out marketing language, images, any of this stuff, right? The faster we can learn. And it's not about avoiding failure. It's often about getting there quickly, learning the lesson, and then leveraging what we learn. And you did that again and again, Nick, and I think that's really fantastic. So let's talk about that optimization a little more. We talk about funnels all the time, right? And looking for where the leaks are in your funnel. And this is something that you did in your business as you continued to iterate and test. What were some of the things you found in your funnel that you were able to test and improve, again and again?
It has to do with the funnel, but it's not necessarily an answer that you may expect. And I think one of the most impactful things in order to generate business, right, is we have to make money, right? And in order to make money, we have to make sales. And in order to make sales, you have to be aligned with your offer in what you're delivering. And I think sometimes people get caught up and they're not sure about what they're selling. And if you aren't sure about what you're selling, it's going to make it a lot harder to get sales. And one of the things that I was actually avoiding early on, and I hired a coach, and it's funny how these little things can make such a huge impact, where I was trying to build out this funnel. I so desperately wanted to have this evergreen built out where I had this free training, and someone goes to this free training, and then they buy the program, like through this funnel and nurture sequences, and like how can I optimize this webinar or this free training that's going to drive the greatest results. Well, one of my coaches just said, you need to get on more calls. Simple as that. And so there was so often where, again, I was sales averse. I was nervous about getting on calls, and all of a sudden my coach says, you got to get on more sales. And so I stopped taking people to my lead magnets, and I just started getting on more calls with people. And so through that process, you start to, again, learn by doing, where I was figuring out what my customers were struggling with, what their objections were, what was happening, right? What's going to get them from one place to another. And even that time, I used to get so nervous to jump on a sales call. I'm worried, like, are they going to buy, especially when you're in this state of desperation where your credit card debt is piling up and you need to get these sales really bad. And so when I had that alignment in my offer of like, this is really great, again, but it took these iterations. It wasn't until I had this big package that included coaching, included the video, the digital directing with the editing services that I thought to myself, this is it. I know that I can get them from where I want them to go, or where they are, to where I want them to go, because all they got to do is just show up with me. Like, I can do this. And so it was the delivery, it was the offer that actually made selling so much easier, because now I had this new refined confidence on what I was offering. So again, having that alignment in your deliveries is going to help all areas of the funnel. And I think in my case, right, we're so often trying to tweak the online funnel, where are you fully invested in understanding what your customers' problems are? Because the more that you just are getting on phone calls, that's going to help you to help all areas of your marketing effort, from strategic content that you're creating, from email marketing. And so we need to have that clarity on our key target customer and what they're experiencing to even be able to fully market to them. So again, I think that's a key element, is, being aligned with your offer, but also being aligned and understanding your customer from all of the different aspects of what they're going through on a regular basis, what their struggles are. Again, you don't know this if you're not in the niche. So this is like full circle. You can't get all of this information in a broad perspective.
When we talk about niches, I think too, many of us can relate to being at a networking event or getting to know someone somewhere. And I remember talking to this realtor, and I asked him, like, it's amazing, you're a real estate agent. Like, are you working with buyers or sellers? And his answer was like, well, yeah, buyers and sellers. I'm like, well, are we talking like single families or condos? Or are we talking multifamilies? And he's like, I do all of those. I'm like, well, which zip codes or which cities do you specialize in? And he's like, well, the entire, area, anyone, anywhere. And like, I am trying to figure out who I can refer to him. And he's giving me nothing to work with. He is the biggest generalist. And I can think of any other realtor to refer someone to based on their niche or area of expertise. And so often when I'm meeting someone and hearing what pigeonhole they're in or industry, I want to know how they stand out so I can refer them business. And he was doing me no favors in that regards. So you figured out your ideal client, which obviously makes attracting them so much easier. So the two things I just want to clarify for our listeners there are, one is you figured out who that ideal customer profile was. And two, once you did, you were able to have what we call congruency from the title of that page to the landing page to the images to the words you have to the offer to all of it, simply by building on that niche. So let's click into that for a sec, Nick. You chose this new path of dialing into this niche, which also gives you some flexibility in how much you get to charge and adjust how much competition there is. Two really valuable things. How much did you focus on niching in and working with the traffic and the prospects you were already attracting versus just trying to feed more generic prospects into that funnel?
Yeah, so that's a great point, because what's funny is when I was doing the group coaching, I was selling this offer that, it evolved in price, and I grandfathered people in, like, I think I did a $50 launch, and then it was like $100, and then eventually it even got up to like $350. I think it was the highest that it was at per month for group coaching. But what I realized that at this like $350 dollar price point is that the people that were in there were, for lack of a better term, just more difficult to deal with in some cases. I had like one standout student that was awesome, and I was able to actually use his success in a lot of my content. He was one of those people that you were talking about earlier that just like went off and did it. And he like started making videos and he started doing it. I was like, oh my God, okay, I'm going to lean into Jonathan. Thank you. You're my poster child now. And I was able to kind of use him as that kind of successful key, point of contact. But, one of the things when you're going through this aspect of where your customers are kind of struggling themselves, it becomes not as ideal. And so what's funny is that when I shifted my program to more of this kind of done with you, where I had these customers that, and some of the examples, like the people that bought the editing services that I mentioned earlier, like those were the ones that could afford a higher price. And those are the ones that paid me without much resistance. I'm like, oh my gosh, is this possible where I can charge more and these people are actually paying it without resistance? Like, how is this? How am I struggling to sell a $350 a month coaching program, but all of a sudden I start offering thousands of dollars of packaging and it becomes easier to sell? And so that became very clear as I kind of crafted this bigger package that was more of like I think it started at 6. And then eventually it was like 7. And this is a side note, I am always increasing my rates. How can I add more value, but then also increase my rates? And so it's increased over the years where now it's a $12K offer. And so you can kind of see how it's developed and how I've added more value into what I'm offering. But it's funny is that I find it easier to sell the $12,000 package than it was to try to sell that $350 thing. And I'm also, when a customer comes to me and they're saying that they, where they're at in their business, I go, I totally understand. Here's where you need to go. And so, and that's something I hate that this has happened so many times, but I refer to someone else and I don't try and sell someone something and they thank me. I hate that people are thanking me for what I'm doing is what I think everyone should be doing. This isn't something that I deserve to be thanked for. I don't think people should be thanked for just doing the right thing and not trying to sell something to someone that isn't right for what you offer. And so once you really understand who your target customer is based on revenue, because that became part of my clarity and understanding like where they're at. So when I'm asking qualifying questions during a consultation and they're at a lower level, I'm like, I'm probably not even going to pitch them. I'm probably not even going to ask them what it is. I'm gonna pass it along to other people that I know in the industry, right? And it comes back to what you said earlier about referring. I love having a whole pocket full of other companies that I can help support them to get where they're at. And so like there's a couple really great, sales coaches that are in the industry that I partner with, that I speak at their events. And so I'm like, hey, go talk to them, build up your client base, and then we can come back to getting video, because this isn't my offer isn't the thing that's going to radically change your business. And I'm not making that promise either. I'm being very upfront and honest. This is just meant to be one more tool in your tool belt that's going to help drive conversions, that's going to help in your marketing effort. But if you're not doing these other things that these sales coaches are talking about, then what I'm going to do is not going to help you. And we're just both wasting each other's time. And so that was kind of a big aspect of, again, getting that clarity on the offer, because then you start to see, all right, well, who can afford who has the time to get on these calls and create this content with me, right? And you start to get really excited about those customers that you like send them an invoice for thousands of dollars and they pay it. And you're like, man, I didn't know that this could exist. And it's such a beautiful place to be in.
It really is. And there's 3 things you touched on with pricing that I jotted down that I want to highlight for our listeners, right? One is that it's okay to increase your prices, and you actually should. But 2, there's a difference between increasing pricing arbitrarily and increasing the value that you're delivering in line with that. In the book, this comes up very often, that it's not about just, sell more. It's always be delivering value to the point that your buyers are happy to exchange money for the value that they're receiving, right? And the third piece is that, especially for like recurring services, you don't need to just go change the pricing on all your existing customers. It's okay to grandfather them in or leave that pricing while you experiment with new pricing models, right? None of us like receiving a price increase notification when the value hasn't changed. So go make sure you can get that new price point from new customers and that it's valuable, right? And then you can go back if you want to existing customers. You don't have to do that right away. So again, those three that I heard there were, one, it's okay and you should be increasing your pricing. Two, make sure value goes up as well and you're always over delivering on the value side. And three, no one's saying you have to go do things to your existing customers. You can always test with new prospects coming through the front door. Love it. Okay. So implementation, you start putting these changes in place, you're niching down, you're tweaking your offers and experimenting and all. What were some of the challenges or hurdles you faced as you began to implement these changes in the business?
Yeah, I think a big aspect as you start to kind of dial this in, I think part of why I had resistance in doing certain things, like one of the aspects was why I was so resistant to even offering video editing services was just this idea that I don't want to edit videos. And, like that's how we think of things often. Like, oh, I don't want to do this. Like, Nick, you don't have to. You can have somebody else do this. So it's not even something that you have to do. And so that was one objection or thing that I needed to overcome in really just thinking about that I don't have to do everything within this process. But it did come down to really, developing these systems that are created. But, one of the things, and I remember, my coach said this to me, he's like, he used, sorry, I do profanity, but I won't use it. But he's just like, go break stuff, right? He's like, go break stuff. And so that to me, again, I think is a really important element around business of how are we just making decisions to figure out where problems are happening so that we can then fix it. And so, one example when I was creating these new systems and offering editing services was having to, customers send me reviews, and all of a sudden my email inbox is insane because I'm sending these videos after the clients like via email, and then they're sending me revisions back. Then I'm taking those revisions and I'm sending them to my editor. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I can't keep doing it this way. Right. And so then I invested in another coach. As you know, I've had a lot of coaches, and actually this particular individual is the reason I'm here, Kevin. So shout out to Kevin. He's awesome. And he specifically really helped me to dial in all of the systems to get me out of these pieces that were preventing me. Because, once you start to build up your client base, you realize that your time starts filling up pretty quickly in what you need to do. And we can't grow and scale when we're spending too much time in activities that are not driving the success of the business. And so it became very clear which pieces I needed to get away from and get out of. And I remember even having resistance to this, and just trusting, that what we were building in this new automated system. But then it was so funny because when it finally got built and it started working, I was like, oh my gosh, is this real? Is this happening? This is the best thing ever. I should have done this a year ago. Again, you start to, so many times we make this decision that we're like, oh, I should have done this sooner, right? And so that becomes such a huge element, really dialing in the systems to optimizing our own time so that we could focus on areas that are going to help us to grow and scale and really be that visionary we are for our businesses.
Yeah, that's powerful. So, as you look forward, beyond just that implementation phase, you aren't just looking at gross revenue, but the profitability piece is also important. And you touched on some of this in terms of, buying back your time and the things you're not doing and someone else is, or that you're just not even offering, right? So after you dialed in your conversions, you increased the pricing, changed up the offer and all, how did that impact not just your gross revenues, but how did that help you on the profitability side?
Yeah. You start to look at things from how you're pricing things when you're not doing them either. And so like that became an avenue where, I leverage and utilize virtual assistants in how we can look at like, all right, well, how long is it going to take them to do this? And then I'm basically just, increasing that price on base the time. And so when I actually started not doing the task, all of a sudden I started making more money because I was charging for someone else to do it. And I was charging, what I would probably, if I was paying myself, way more than what I was charging my customer. But now I was able to charge less to the customer, but I'm not the one doing it. And now I'm making more based on the margins and the difference between how much I would pay myself compared to how much I have to pay them for the actual service that I was delivering. And so that became really clear when I was looking at my prices and looking at my margins of being, like, these margins are looking pretty good. Like, how can I, double down on this aspect? So like the way that was unique about my offer is that mine's, part coaching, part services, right? So there's an element where I'm working with them, I'm coaching them, helping them to plan out content. And then there's an element where we're editing the videos, optimizing their YouTube channel, creating YouTube thumbnails, creating flyers for them. And so from that standpoint, like the coaching to me was always like, all right, well, that's like my money that I'm paying for myself per hour. But then the other side had a lot more flexibility into like what I was charging and how I could charge based on my team and what they were executing on. And so, but the element too is that when you dial in the systems that now I'm not doing that task and I'm not sending emails, all of a sudden it was the thing that was giving me the biggest headache that I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? Where you're like, I don't want to offer video editing services because I can't send emails like this anymore. It's like, well, there's probably a better way. And then when you do unlock that better way, you start like floating a little bit off the ground.
What I'm hearing there is that when you simplify what the offer is and you create a repeatable system, now someone else is able to execute that system, which not only frees you up, it also provides a level of consistency for your clients as well. Powerful on both sides.
Yeah, I was forced to develop the systems, right? And like that's kind of what sometimes happens where, when you're all of a sudden filled up and you're like, well, all this is in my head, and like, well, you got to get this on paper, and with ChatGPT, it makes life so much easier to, develop systems based on getting things in your head into SOPs. And so I realized that the superpower was the more that I started creating SOPs, the better my life became. And there's a correlation between me creating SOPs and delegating tasks to my overall happiness and well-being.
It's amazing the direct connection there. All right. So if you're talking to a newer entrepreneur, right? They're at that spot you were years ago. Maybe they're feeling buried in debt or they're considering just quitting and finding a job. Like, what advice would you have for an entrepreneur who is feeling stuck like you were and maybe can't see that light and the future for where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's situation is different, but I think there's an element of, what are you willing to do to be successful? What actions are you willing to do? And so if you're, because what I find sometimes is I've seen this with entrepreneurs is that they're just not doing the action that things that people that they're listening to are doing. And so when I think about the success that I've had, I'm like, I'm just doing what people tell me to do. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm not doing anything different. It's just I follow coaches and they tell me to do the thing and then I go do the thing and then I see the success. And so it's not rocket science. There's a lot of people that are just consuming all of this content, whether it's podcasts or reading books, right? Watching YouTube videos, but then they're not doing the thing. They're not taking the action. And so if you don't take the actions, you don't learn. One of my favorite quotes from one of my coaches was like, action creates clarity. And so if you're not sure what to do, it's because you're in inaction. If you start to take action, the things will align, right? It's like the path reveals itself as you take more steps closer. As you start to walk up these steps, the proverbial steps that you're walking up, you realize that, oh, wait, now there's all these other doorways that I didn't see before that open up because I didn't take these first couple steps. And so if you're listening to this, you're like, oh, well, I never tried niching down. I'm like, all right, well, then, go try that. Like what haven't you tried that you've said that you should try that you continue to not try because you're coming up with reasons why it won't work, but you didn't actually try, so you don't know if it will work or not.
It's always easier to find reasons something won't work than to just go do it and see what you can see. It's like, waiting to pull out of the driveway until all the lights are green between where you are and your destination. The path reveals itself, like you said. You get to an intersection and the light goes green. Maybe it's red. That's okay. Then it goes green. Maybe there's construction, so you take a turn. It's okay. The point is you've still left and you're on the path and you're going towards that destination, as opposed to sitting and waiting for all the things you can't control to line up and show you the path that's clear. So to sum that up, folks, take action. Action brings about clarity. Love that, Nick. All right. So knowing what you know now about fixing a leaky funnel and having done this for your own business, what would you have done differently at the very start when you were getting going and starting to grow?
Got on more phone calls. That's the first thing that comes up to me for sure. And niching down, those two things, is niching down and just getting on phone calls and talking with people. I think, early entrepreneurs, especially in today's world, is like everyone wants to build an online business and they're not willing to get on a phone with somebody. And like that to me is the number one thing. It's like, just because your business is online doesn't mean that you shouldn't be, doing sales calls and talking with people on the phone. You're going to get so much more insight, so much more value in just trying to get on many phone calls as you possibly, can. And just like having conversations with people. And it doesn't even have to be a sales. Hey, I'm interested in learning more. Like, would you be willing to jump on a call with me? Right? Just like start to look at these, industries. I mean, one of the things, again, this is like a side note, I'm going on a tangent here, but it's, when you see, I see restaurants in San Diego open all the time and then they're like gone. And it's like, dude, what are these people doing? Like you can't, it's, Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. No, they will not. That is not how business works. You need to get loud. You need to scream on the rooftops. Like, I have a business and this is what I do. Come talk to me. And I think that's another thing too, is, you have to be willing to put yourself out there, to get attention, to be in front of people. And like, that's what it takes. The people sometimes that are the loudest are the ones that are the most successful, because people know what they do. People are seeing them on a regular, consistent basis. They know what they do, right? I love that element where you talked about, it's kind of, circling back to what you said from a referral standpoint. You want to get more business, you have to be clear on what you do and who you serve so that referral partners can then refer you very clearly. If you have friends that like know your business and they can't directly tell people what you do, then you're not doing a good enough job. You should be getting referrals from the people closest to it, at least have an idea of what you do. Because coming from me, I am in this very sliver of a niche. And I have people reaching out to me, friends from high school, saying, hey, Nick, do you have any home care companies that you recommend? We need it for my mom. So I know that I'm doing it right because I'm getting these very, obscure people. Like my brother even like stumbled upon some person that a home care agency is like, hey, my brother helps home care agencies. Like, are you doing anything? Right. So like, we have to make sure that we're clear on what we do. And then everyone that we know knows exactly what we do.
Beautifully said. So to recap for our listeners, you move from the edge of returning to a corporate job and facing heavy debt to cleaning up your sales process, refining your products, and confidently raising your prices to build that life of true freedom and impact. Is that right?
Yep. Sounds right. Yeah. I like to say that I quit my dream job so that I can create my dream life.
Ooh, I like that, Nick. All right. So for our listeners who want to learn more about you, where should they go right now, Nick?
So I'm all over the place on social media. That's, I would say right now, I think LinkedIn is one of my favorite places to hang out more. I've just been leaning more into that. Nick Bonitatibus, there's not many of us out there, so it's pretty easy to find me, which is definitely nice.
Fantastic. We'll have that in the show notes. That's mostly where I hang out as well on LinkedIn. So in our posts, and if you're listening to this or watching this, you'll have that link right over to Nick there as well. Nick, this was great. Thank you so much for sharing with us your journey and how you grew, got stuck, and then broke through that plateau and got back to that growth you so deserve. Congrats on the success, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. Quick reminder, hit that subscribe button right now so you can get more episodes when they come out automatically. And remember to leave that rating and review right now.